Welcome to the Sisters with Swords podcast, where we explore God's Word and discover His design for women as we wield our weapons of warfare on the battlefield of everyday life. We're your hosts, Holly Knight and Janie Burkett. Hey there, sisters, and welcome to another episode of Sisters with Swords. Before we hop into the lesson today, Janie, I want to talk about last night.
Oh, this is going to be fun.
Our evening.
Yeah.
Because we took, us along with our husbands, we took our mom and her husband, Tim, and your mother-in-law and your father-in-law, Dan. The 8 of us went out for dinner. Now, this was a belated Mother's Day celebration because we were out of town on Mother's Day weekend. Shout out to Hope City United Church in Albany, Georgia. We loved being with the ladies down there.
That was so fun.
Such a great night. And then, we hit the beach like it was our job.
Yeah.
Which was, happy Mother's Day to us.
I got sunburned.
You did.
I was so happy about it.
Yes, because that was the only time that you'll ever lay out this
the whole summer. I hate laying out.
And you've got this gorgeous pool in your backyard.
And I hate laying out.
And it's raining today. Otherwise, I would have my swimsuit on right now, and I would head right across the street after recording this and hit the pool. But laying out, being out in the sun, it's one of my favorite things to do other than napping. Which I can nap out there, and I do. So that's fun. So we had a great Mother's Day weekend in Georgia and then down at the beach. So last night we had a belated Mother's Day dinner, and we took the whole crew, all 8 of us, there's a game show. How do you even describe it? It's called the Great Big Game Show or something like that. But it's like an escape room or, putt-putt golf, but it's a game show. It's a game show. And you can go reserve like a little private game show room for the evening. And we did guys against girls.
Yes.
And here's what I want to say about this. We demoralized
them.
Those guys with our trivia and our knowledge.
Yes.
And we were quick on the buzzer. We were sharp.
Yeah.
We were in tune. And when I say we, it was me and you.
Right.
Mom and Mary were like, ah! Janie and I were in it. And it was really you and I versus our husbands.
Well, and really,
just
Jake
my
said,
husband.
No,
what?
Me and you versus Jake. Jake said that Bradley got so demoralized after the first time, and he was like, I quit.
He was, and here's why this was the best thing that's ever happened to me.
So Jake was like, I felt like I was the only one.
Okay, but Bradley had some answers.
Oh no, he definitely had. That's it. Like Bradley knows the trivia.
Yes, he knew it. But here's why it was the greatest night of my life. Because I am married, and I do not say this lightly, to a certifiable genius. And he is a genius on many different levels. Obviously a musical genius, but he's a math genius. He's like you, Janie, where he can read something and it sticks in there, and he can recall, and he can memorize stats and just a lot of useless information.
Yeah.
You two are very similar in that way. And he's very good at, I don't play board games with him. Because I don't play any games with him because I literally never win. I never beat him at anything. And last night, I think, was the first time I've ever beat him at anything. And it was a thrashing. It was a thrashing. And I thought he was so upset. And I can't tell you how happy that made me. To see him over there, and I had taken away his will to live at this game show. And it was the best night of my life. Because I have never beat him at anything. But we crushed the guys last night. And then he was in a bad mood for a while. But I wasn't.
No, we were having a great time.
We had a great time.
And then we had a really great Italian food after.
Yeah, we did. So I want to say this, no one understands the pain that I endure by being married to someone who's so smart. And I'm not dumb. I'm not a genius like he is. And he is he's right about everything. He wins everything. He excels at everything he does, and which is all reasons why I love him.
You've described me growing up with you.
Okay, so you're right.
It was the worst.
Okay, good.
So I do know exactly how you feel.
Well, then there it is. So I am the Janie to his Holly. There is nothing that he touches that does not turn to gold, that he does not win, that he does not excel at. And I cannot beat him at anything. But last night, we came through on that trivia.
Oh, yeah.
And there was one little miniature game that we did that I didn't really understand the rules, and we should have had more points.
Right.
Because I yelled out the answer when it was not our turn to yell out the answer, because it was like a Wheel of Fortune type situation, which I thrive at a Wheel of Fortune.
Yeah, that's your gifting.
That right there, I will.
Except for I got ramen noodles.
You did get ramen noodles, but I guess elementary school teacher with
like,
only the E's on the board.
Yes. I think
there was only an E.
There was E and there was one other one, S.
Or R.
It was E and S.
Okay. And I guessed elementary school teacher. Principal.
Right.
It was elementary school principal.
Because there was nothing in the bottom.
No.
It was E and S. You had the E's for the elementary and then the S for the school.
And then no letters on the bottom. And I sat there and I go,
elementary school principal.
And it wasn't our turn to guess. And so we didn't get those points. And I was very upset. And your husband started taunting me.
Yes.
And I thought I was going to get physical and violent because I can't play games, you guys. I cannot play games because if I don't win, I don't want to play. I am so freaking competitive. Mom had a T-shirt for me. I'll never forget it when I was in first grade. And the T-shirt that she had made for me, it says, if I can't win, I'm not playing. I had a T-shirt that said that in the first grade.
How do you remember that?
Because I was like, this is it. If I can't win, I'm not playing. And that is, I feel somehow that you're more competitive than me, though. So I don't know why I get so upset about this. And you're just sitting there calm and cool as a cucumber right now.
Well, I've really started to become more intimate with the Holy Ghost.
Gosh. You've been blowing that shofar, and that's really broken the spirit of competition off of you.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm just more tired.
Yeah.
I think it's the end of the school year, and I've got 15 kids, and they've got 15 events. Like, literally, as we're sitting here, I realize they don't have this certain thing they're supposed to have at school today, and I don't know how to figure that out. But anyways, I think I'm just more tired than you are.
Well, no, you are. You are definitely more tired than me because your kids are younger, and you are a CEO of a business. So you're definitely more tired than I am, but I mean, I can't play board games. Don't invite me to, what's that game everyone's playing right now? Mahjong?
Yeah.
I have no idea what that is, nor do I care to know.
Okay.
Nor do I want to play.
Okay.
Because if I can't win it, I'm not going to be fun for you.
Yeah.
I am not a fun board game girly. And our mom loves a card game.
But Holly can really play the skip bow.
I do love Skip-Bo and Uno, but Mom is a card game girl.
Oh yeah,
and I don't ever play with her. She knows better.
Mom and Mary really loved it last night because especially Mom, 'cause she really wanted to do the game show thing, but she did really want to win, and so we ensured a win for her.
We did. We got in there. We rolled up our sleeves. And we demolished and demoralized our husbands.
But also, can I just say for the record that the very first thing was called like range, and you had to guess like what was the percentage range. And the very first question was, what percentage of people order their breakfast with scrambled eggs?
Oh, yeah.
And I'm sitting here, the owner of a breakfast restaurant.
Yeah.
saying it's less than 50%. And they're like, no, it's really high. It's higher than 50%. I'm like, no, it's not.
Yeah.
Because again, my favorite part of being, if I'm in the restaurant and working, I'm at the cash register where I'm taking everyone's order. So I'm literally getting their egg order.
Yeah.
So I can tell you how many people order their egg scrambled. It is not more than 50%. And the way nobody listened to me.
We didn't.
And then got it wrong. I was
Yeah.
like, hi. Like literally this is, I thrive here. Like the only other thing you could ask would be like, what are the ingredients for biscuits? And I could know that more. But like, I mean, I really knew that one. And they wouldn't. They would not listen to me.
So we would have won by more points had we listened to Janie.
Right.
But so yeah, it was such a great night. We had fun and we slaughtered our husbands.
Would you like to know the ending score?
They would. They want to know.
11,350 to 0.
From 0 to hero, just like that. And that's where we ended the night, was our husbands' souls being crushed. And it was such a victory for me.
Indeed.
So now let's talk about a love story.
Okay.
About two lovebirds meeting. We're still in the book of Ruth.
Yeah.
And we've learned about, we were foreigners in a famine. We were clingy and committed. Last week, Ruth really clung to her mother-in-law. We went into that. And today, we are learning about having favor in the field. And we're going to be in Ruth chapter 2. So, Janie, if you would just read all of Ruth chapter 2 for us, this is where it gets fun.
Now, Naomi had a relative on her husband's side. He was a prominent man of noble character from Elimelech's family. His name was Boaz. Ruth, the Moabitess, asked Naomi, will you let me go into the fields and gather fallen grain behind someone with whom I find favor? Naomi answered her, go ahead, my daughter. So Ruth left and entered the field to gather grain behind the harvesters. She happened to be in the portion of the field belonging to Boaz, who was from Elimelech's family. Later, when Boaz arrived from Bethlehem, he said to the harvesters, the Lord be with you. The Lord bless you, they replied. Boaz asked his servant who was in charge of the harvesters, whose young woman is this? The servant answered, she is the young Moabite woman who returned with Naomi from the territory of Moab. She asked, will you let me gather fallen grain among the bundles behind the harvesters? She came and has been on her feet since early morning, except that she rested a little in the shelter. Then Boaz said to Ruth, listen, my daughter, don't go and gather grain in another field, and don't leave this one, but stay here close to my female servants. See which field they are harvesting and follow them. Haven't I ordered the young men not to touch you? When you are thirsty, go and drink from the jars the young men have filled. She fell face down, bowed to the ground, and said to him, why have I found favor with you, so that you notice me, although I am a foreigner? Boaz answered her, everything you have done for your mother-in-law since your husband's death has been fully reported to me. How you left your father and mother and your native land, and how you came to a people you didn't previously know. May the Lord reward you for what you have done, and may you receive a full reward from the Lord God of Israel, under whose wings you have come for refuge. My Lord, she said, I have found favor with you, for you have comforted and encouraged your servant, although I am not like one of your female servants. At mealtime, Boaz told her, come over here and have some bread and dip it in the vinegar sauce. So she sat beside the harvesters, and he offered her roasted grain. She ate and was satisfied and had some left over. When she got up to gather grain, Boaz ordered his young men, let her even gather grain among the bundles, and don't humiliate her. Pull out some stalks from your bundles for her and leave them for her to gather. Don't rebuke her. So Ruth gathered grain in the field until evening. She beat out what she had gathered, and it was about 26 quarts of barley. She picked up the grain and went into the town where her mother-in-law saw what she had gleaned. She brought out what she had left over from her meal and gave it to her. Her mother-in-law said to her, where did you gather barley today, and where did you work? May the Lord bless the man who noticed you. Ruth told her mother-in-law, whom she had worked with, and said, "The name of the man I worked with today is Boaz." Then Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, "May the Lord bless him, because he has not abandoned his kindness to the living or the dead." Naomi continued, "The man is a close relative. He is one of our family redeemers." Ruth the Moabitess said, "He also told me, 'Stay with the young men until they have finished all of my harvest.'" So Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, Ruth, "My daughter, it is good for you to work with his female servants so that nothing will happen to you in another field." Ruth stayed close to Boaz's female servants and gathered grain until the barley and the wheat harvests were finished, and she lived with her mother-in-law.
This is where the lovebirds meet. Ruth and Boaz. And we know what's coming in the rest of the story, but this is such a great, lovely encounter. And so let's go through it. Let's see all the fun stuff that's kind of hidden in here that we can look at. So with verse 1, this is our introduction to Boaz. And we know just from reading verse 1 that there's a few things here immediately that jump off the page. He was prominent in the community. He had great wealth, and he was a man of noble, impeccable character. So then in verse 2, it starts out with Ruth the Moabitess. Again, I said last week, we're going to see that phrase, Ruth the Moabitess, used several times within the book of Ruth, because the author wants you to really remember that she's from Moab. He does not want you to forget. So what the writer is doing is reminding us of Ruth's status as a foreigner and a Gentile, not a Jew. One outside of the covenant promises of Israel and a stranger to Israel's God, Jehovah. So every time we see Ruth's designation as a Moabitess, it reminds us that Ruth did not belong. A Gentile who the Jews often despise as in the same category as dogs, misfits, and outcasts. Yeah, isn't that sad?
Yeah.
But that's how the Jews viewed these people, viewed the Moabites. And we see here that she comes to Naomi and says, "Will you let me go into the fields and gather fallen grain behind someone with whom I find favor?" These ladies were hungry. They had nobody taking care of them. They had nobody providing for them. They had come back to Bethlehem alone, without husbands, without Naomi's sons, and it was the men's job to provide for the women, and they did not have men to provide for the women. So Ruth here, we see she just does the next right thing. Well, what's the next right thing? We're hungry. We need food. Okay, so I can go out to the fields and I can collect the barley that has been dropped from behind the harvesters. She did not wait to be prompted. She took the initiative. She is both assertive and submissive as a foreigner in an unknown land. So she's assertive in that she says, "I've got to go glean." But she's submissive in that she asks permission, okay? So God has promised to provide for his people, but this provision does not come without work on our end. And we have talked about this over and over about how God expects us to put feet to our faith. We're expected to work. And I heard someone say, it might have even been Dave Ramsey, that yes, God does provide for the birds. He feeds the birds, but God doesn't just drop food in the bird's nest.
He doesn't drop worms in their nest.
Yeah. The birds have to go out and get
them.
the food that has been provided by God. And so that's exactly what we see here with Ruth. There is a promise for protection and provision of widows, but Ruth had to go work in order to get that provision. And in verse 3, we see here that she just happened to be in the portion of the field belonging to Boaz, who is a part of Elimelech's family. So this is a providential occurrence orchestrated by God. Ruth, through Naomi, would have known of the Levitical law regarding widows gleaning from fields, as laid out in Deuteronomy 24:19. I'm going to read that to you real quick. That verse says, "When you reap the harvest in your field and you forget a sheaf in the field, do not go back to get it. It is to be left there for the resident alien, the fatherless, and the widow, so that the Lord your God may bless you in all the work of your hands." So Naomi would have instructed Ruth on this Levitical law. So Ruth knew that she could go glean in fields per the law. and take what was dropped behind. So God is to be trusted when his providences seem to run contrary to his promises. Okay? So his providence is taking place right here, and that Ruth just so happened to be in Boaz's field. In verse 4, we see later when Boaz arrived from Bethlehem, he said to the harvesters, "The Lord be with you, and the Lord bless you," is what they replied. The writer, again, is wanting to heap on coincidence upon coincidence, that he just so happens to arrive from Bethlehem at this time. But Boaz assures the workers of the Lord's presence with them as they work. He says, "The Lord be with you." So this is very important because the presence of the Lord is in Boaz's field. It's invited there. When Boaz came to his workers, he prayed a blessing over them. They expressed their kindness by praying a blessing over him. There was mutual respect and affection shown between Boaz and his employees, which is huge. And I would say you could speak to that as well, having employees, having people that work for you in your business. When there is a mutual respect shown by the person who owns the business and the person that's working the business, that's a healthy work environment. That's a healthy field. Mm-hmm. That's a place where God's presence would want to stay. And especially because remember that this is taking place during the days of the judges. And so what was happening during the days of the judges? Israel was doing what they saw best in their own eyes. They did as they pleased. They were not honoring the Lord. They were not serving the Lord. They were worshiping other gods. They had turned their backs on gods. But here we see an oasis of godliness cultivated in Boaz's field. Just as Elimelech and Naomi served the Lord, and that influence went into their daughters-in-law, Orpah and Ruth. Now here we see Boaz is serving the Lord during the days of the judges. And what a haven of godliness his fields must have been. And in verse 5, we see that he asked his servant who was in charge of the harvesters, "Whose young woman is this?" So this is important because Boaz would have been very familiar with all of the workers in his field, especially if there was such a great rapport between them. He's blessing his workers. They are in turn blessing him. He knows their names. He knows who all of them are. I'm sure he knows their families, their stories. He's very in tune with the people that are on his field. And so he would have been very aware of the presence of a stranger in his field because he tended his business so carefully. And so again in verse 6 it says she is the young Moabite woman. We're just letting you know she's a Moabite, okay? Who returned with Naomi from the territory of Moab. Again, Moab. She's a Moabite. She asked, "Will you let me gather fallen grain amongst the bundles behind the harvesters?" She came and has been on her feet since early morning, except that she has rested a little in the shelter. So we see Ruth being assertive yet submissive to authority yet again here. She's assertive in that she has come to work, but she is submissive in that she asked, "Will you let me gather fallen grain?" So assertiveness and submission all in one. And she did have an understanding of that Levitical law. She was not there for a handout. She was there to work diligently. And so that just shows so much about Ruth's character. She doesn't go up and say, "Can you give me some barley? Can you give me some grain?" She says, "Look, I will come and I will work diligently for the leftovers. And I will do that morning and night." This is again showing her posture, showing her character. In verse 8, Boaz says to Ruth, so we have their very first interaction, "Listen, my daughter, don't go and gather grain in another field, and don't leave this one, but stay here close to my female servants." Boaz initiates this conversation with Ruth. He took the first steps towards her to meet her physical and emotional needs. So by calling Ruth my daughter, he immediately extends tenderness and hopefully some sort of familial comfort. And this would have been the first kind word
Oh.
Naomi would have, Ruth would have heard in this new land as a foreigner. He could have said, "You're a Moabite. Get out of here. You're not even allowed in the temple of the Lord. We're not supposed to be in your presence at all." He could have said, "Get out of here. You're a Moabite woman." But he said, "My daughter." He called her my daughter. "Listen, my daughter. Don't go and gather in another field, but stay here where you will be safe." And the word stay in the Hebrew is dabak, which means to cling. Ruth used this word to emphasize her devotion to Naomi. When it says Ruth clung to Naomi, that was the same word, dabak. And here we see that Boaz is telling Ruth, "Cling to my fields. Cling to this protection that I have for you here." Boaz continues in verse 9, "See which field they are harvesting and follow them. Haven't I ordered the young men not to touch you? When you are thirsty, go and drink from the jars the young men have filled." The fields in these days had no fences or hedges dividing them, and it would have been easy for Ruth to wander off of Boaz's land without knowing it, because there was no line of demarcation. There were no fences, no visible borders. Boaz obviously would have known where his borders lay, but Ruth wouldn't. So he's saying, "Stay close to my female servants because they know where the borders of my field are. And as long as you are in my field, you are protected. And strangers cannot get to you." And we're going to talk a little bit later, but the importance of the appointed field that we're working in. We're really gonna once we get through just the intricacies of this narration, we're really gonna dive into the applications of this towards the end of the lesson. So I'm gonna skip over that for right now. But I do want to say that Boaz provided first for Ruth's physical needs, and we talked about that before.
Yeah.
Jesus, when he was on his earthly ministry, the first thing he did for people was provide for their physical needs. Mm-hmm. It's hard to even understand that you have a heart issue or an emotional issue or a wound, an emotional wound that needs to be healed when all you need is you're thirsty. Mm-hmm. I don't know how I'm feeling emotionally. All I know is that I'm thirsty and I need a drink. Like, quench this thirst, and then we can talk about my heart problem.
Or I'm hangry.
So hangry. I can't function. I can't do anything else because I'm angry and hungry, and I need to eat and get the blood sugar stabilized. Then we can talk about how I'm feeling. Then we can talk about my emotional and spiritual needs. But first, your girl needs a chicken nugget.
Amen.
Okay. So he provided for Ruth's thirst with water. But through Ruth and Boaz, this is a fun little fact, through Ruth and Boaz's union, they are direct descendants of Jesus, or they're direct ancestors of Jesus. Jesus is a direct descendant of them. So here we see Boaz offering Ruth water, and we know that through their union, we will all be offered the living water of Jesus Christ. And I'm going to go into a little bit later also, I want to talk about why Boaz was so kind to Ruth, because this was never brought up in a commentary. I just knew it, and so I knew it. And so we're going to talk about that. And I might get on a little soapbox about that later, about why Boaz was so kind. But for now, let's go on to verse 10. "So she fell face down, bowed to the ground, and said to him, 'Why have I found favor with you so that you notice me, although I am a foreigner?'" Ruth knew exactly who she was in this new land. She was a foreign, pagan widow. She was the lowest of the low. So bowing before Boaz showed him that she is more than aware of her current situation and of his benevolence. She's saying, "I understand what you're doing here for me. I understand who I am. I understand who you are. I understand that we are not equal. And I understand that you are going out of your way to provide for me, a pagan widow from a foreign country. I understand all of that." She bows down to him. And this next section, when I studied this next few verses and saw what this word meant in the Hebrew, made me fall in love with Boaz. How much I loved him. It says, "Boaz answered her, But this word answered is anah, A-N-A-H, and it means to raise one's voice. And so several commentators feel that this answer that Boaz gives Ruth right here was shouted out so that all bystanders could hear. Boaz wanted everyone to hear what he thought about Ruth, what he had heard about her, and that he was not ashamed to be identified with her.
Oh, wow.
So he was declaring, he was answering Ruth here, but he was shouting it and declaring it in such a way that everyone heard and everyone understood the character of this woman, how he felt about this woman, and how he was not ashamed to be associated with this woman. So with that in mind, let's hear what he has to say. So Boaz answered her by shouting, "Everything you have done for your mother-in-law since your husband's death has been fully reported to me. How you left your father and mother and your native land, and how you came to a people you did not previously know. May the Lord reward you for what you have done, and may you receive a full reward from the Lord God of Israel, under whose wings you have come for refuge." So we see here Boaz acknowledging Ruth's integrity. We see in the midst of a crooked generation, the days of the judges, he acknowledges the fact that Ruth had counted the cost of moving to Bethlehem with Naomi, and that she knew she came by faith to what she did not know. She moved from a place she knew by faith to a place she did not know. She had counted the cost. And in verse 12, we see that Boaz is blessing Naomi, and he's praying. He is praying a prophetic prayer of, not Naomi. I keep getting Naomi and Ruth's names mixed up. You got to just holler at me when I do that. Say Ruth. Okay. So we see here, good grief, Boaz is blessing Ruth. And it's a prophetic prayer that he is praying over her, which is, "May the Lord reward you for what you have done. May you receive a full reward from the Lord God of Israel, under whose wings you have come for refuge." Notice how God often uses the one who prays as his agent to answer that prayer. Boaz was the human agent for both the present and future recompense for Ruth. He was the one that would answer this prayer. "May you receive a full reward from the Lord." Well, Boaz, you're going to be the one to give her that full reward. What you just prayed for, you will be the answer to.
Wow.
If you pray for others to be blessed by God, do not be surprised if God asks you, as he did Boaz, to give of yourself and your substance to provide for the blessing for others. Don't be surprised if God uses you to answer your own prayer for other people. And that's exactly what we see here with Boaz. Verse 13, Ruth continues, "My Lord," she said, "I have found favor with you, for you have comforted and encouraged your servant, although I am not like one of your female servants." Boaz's words would have meant a great deal to Ruth. Again, she was a foreigner. She had just been through so much pain, so much loss, so much heaviness and emptiness. She's in a foreign country now with her mother-in-law. They have no one to provide for them. And here Boaz is saying, "I know who you are. I know you're a woman of character. I have heard of you. You are welcome here in my fields. Oh, and I'm going to go ahead and pray a prophetic prayer of blessing over you." So these would have been the first cheerful words she heard since the death of her husband in Moab. Her kind reception at the hands of Boaz represented a pivotal turning point for Ruth. Everything up until this point had been death, loss, destruction, sadness, and now here we see Boaz, and we are going to see that everything is about to change for her. And it started with kindness from him, which we're going to talk about in a little bit too. Oh, I can't wait till we get there. Verse 14, at mealtime, Boaz told her, come over here and have some bread and dip it in the vinegar sauce. So she sat beside the harvesters, and he offered her roasted grain. She ate and was satisfied and had some left over. So here we see the master Boaz making himself lowly by dining with the lowly, his servants, just as we would see Jesus do, dining with sinners, dining with prostitutes and tax collectors. Jesus did the exact same thing. He was a master king creator of the universe, and he made himself so lowly as to dine with these people. And that's exactly what Boaz did here. So this specific vinegar that we see here dipping the bread in was actually a weak wine derived as a byproduct of winemaking. So in essence, we see Boaz and Ruth sharing in communion.
Oh.
And this was a prophetic picture of the Messiah who would eventually come through their union. Boaz served Ruth. She was there as a servant. She said, I am a servant, but he said, let me serve you. And what there's so many different pictures of Jesus in this man, but this is one of them. She ate until she was satisfied, and she had some left over. Verse 15, when she got up to gather grain, Boaz ordered his young men, let her even gather grain among the bundles, and do not humiliate her. Oh, I love that. He was so intent for her not to be humiliated or insulted or caused to blush in any way. So we see here Boaz taking care of her physical needs, Boaz taking care of her spiritual needs by praying blessing and the Lord's favor over her. But here we see Boaz taking care of her emotional needs. Do not insult her. Do not humiliate her. Do not cause her to blush. He cared about every aspect of Ruth, and he was so protective of her. Verse 16, he continues, pull out some stalks from the bundles for her and leave them for her to gather, and don't rebuke her. So Ruth was not to know that this was Boaz's gift for her. She would assume that she was gleaning these bundles on her own, but Boaz is saying specifically, take out some big bundles and leave them on the ground for her. Don't humiliate her. Don't tell her you're doing this on purpose. The amplified version of this text says, and let some handfuls fall for her on purpose. And let some handfuls fall for her on purpose. And that got me thinking how often the Lord does that for us. He has handfuls of blessing that he lets fall in our path on purpose. Handfuls of blessing. And in fact, literally anything good that you have in your life is because your Father had a handful of blessing that he let fall in your path on purpose. Because we know that every good and perfect gift comes from above, from the Father of lights. So yes, you're going out and you're working for things. Yes, you have a job. Yes, you have responsibilities. Yes, you have things that you're working on, that you're gleaning, that you're harvesting, that you're sowing into. But there are handfuls of blessings that are coming to you on purpose from the Lord. That job that you're working is a handful of blessing from the Lord on purpose. Your children, as exhausted as we all are right now in May, we get us through the school year, Lord Jesus. It's a handful of blessing that has been put in our path on purpose. So Boaz is saying, drop handfuls of blessing in Ruth's path on purpose. And I love that part, on purpose.
And some of our kids are bigger handfuls than other.
They sure are. Handfuls.
Handfuls.
Jesus.
And sometimes just handfuls of fluff.
Oh,
A little boon is a handful of fluff.
But do you know what though? He's also a handful of gangster.
He is.
That boy is becoming a thug.
He is a thug.
Because he has realized I'm bigger than everybody, and I can do whatever I want.
Yeah.
And at your house, I mean, you've got all these boys in your house. The rule is if one of them hits you, you hit them back. Like, let them know how it felt. And so Boone is used to being hit and hitting back, and that's not really working out so well in social settings.
Right. with children to whom he is not related to.
Correct. So thoughts and prayers.
Indeed.
Okay.
But he does know how to say no hit, because we tell him literally about every 5 minutes, Boone, no hit.
No hit.
Oh, Tay. That's what he does.
But he is a big handful of fluffy, brutal blessing on purpose.
Yes.
Verse 17. So Ruth gathered grain in the field until evening. She beat out what she had gathered, and it was about 26 quarts. So Ruth was gleaning from dawn till dusk with no record of grumbling, and that speaks to her diligence to the task at hand. 26 quarts of grain would have been enough to feed Ruth and Naomi for up to 10 days. So she got a week and a half's worth of provisions from one day of gleaning in Boaz's field. This shows how Boaz's instructions to his reapers aided Ruth, and it also showed how diligently Ruth worked. And we see here a picture of God who is able to do exceedingly abundantly above all we could ever ask or think. Ruth just wanted to go and glean the leftovers so she and Naomi could eat that day.
Yeah.
And she leaves with 26 quarts worth of grain, enough for a week and a half. But she had to go to work. Again, we see God's sovereignty and God's provision.
That's 54 pounds.
You were doing the math there?
Yeah.
54 pounds of grain?
Yeah.
How would she get that home? I'm sure Boaz made somebody help her get that home.
Like our bags of flour at the biscuit bar are 50-pound bags of flour.
Yeah.
They're heavy.
That's like an overweight suitcase. Wow.
But no wheels.
That she was working.
She was putting in the work. And she had some muscles. Mm-hmm. But also she was hungry.
But Boaz had fed her.
He had
watered her.
Yeah.
He had
like
taken care
a cow.
Yep, like a cow.
Because you said he watered her.
He watered her and fed her.
Yeah.
Like a little dog. But she was able to gather far above what she was expecting. And it was God's provision, but Ruth's work ethic and her diligence to do the work. Verse 18, she picked up the grain and went into town where her mother-in-law saw that she had gleaned. She brought out what she had left over from her meal and gave it to her. Wow, so she did carry it into town herself.
She carried it into town herself. My goodness.
And then we see here how did the book of Ruth start? It started with a famine. And what do we see now? More than enough.
She can carry.
More than enough.
Come on.
Yeah. So now we're in a season of abundance after years in a famine. Her mother-in-law said to her, "Where did you gather barley today, and where did you work?" And before she even let Ruth answer, she said, "May the Lord bless the man who noticed you." It doesn't even matter where you did. You worked somewhere. Someone took notice of you, and God bless them.
And someone helped you.
Someone helped you, and let me go ahead and just bless whoever it is. And Ruth told her mother-in-law, whom she had worked with, and said, the name of the man I worked with today is Boaz. So it is encouraging to see the changes that have taken place in Naomi because of what Ruth had done. God used Ruth to turn Naomi's bitterness into gratitude, her unbelief into faith, her despair into hope. One person trusting the Lord and obeying his will can change a situation from defeat to victory. We see here just by one day of gleaning in the fields, how Ruth's obedience to that and diligence in her work affected Naomi's entire countenance, her entire life. And it changed so much for her. So it says here in this verse that, verse 20, let me read this. Then Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, "May the Lord bless him, because he has not abandoned his kindness to the living or the dead." Naomi continued, "The man is a close relative. He is one of our family redeemers." Another way to say this is he is a kinsman redeemer. Some translations will use that phrase, kinsman redeemer. And let me spell out here what the qualifications are for a kinsman redeemer, because this is going to be important going into next week's episode as well. So a kinsman redeemer has to be a blood relative of the deceased man. A blood relative of the deceased man. He has to possess the necessary resources. He has to have income. He has to have money. And he must be willing to pay the purchase price for the widow. So, and then he must be willing to take on that widow as his bride. So we see here that Boaz was a blood relative of Elimelech. He would be considered a candidate for kinsman redeemer for Ruth because he was a blood relative of also Ruth's husband. And he had to be wealthy. He had to have the money to pay for this transaction, to pay the bride price. He had to be willing to pay it, and then he had to be willing to take her as a bride. So there's a lot of contingency there. You could have a kinsman redeemer who is blood related, who had the money, but didn't want to pay it and didn't want to take you as his bride.
Like, or had already had a bride.
Already had a bride, or
children,
or is willing to take you on as a bride but doesn't have the money to pay for the bride price. Like, there's so many variables here. Like, and all of these boxes have to be checked. And so Naomi is saying Boaz checks these boxes. Okay, so Ruth the Moabitess said in verse 21, he also told me, stay with my young men until they have finished all of my harvest. So she's letting Naomi know, Boaz told me to cling to his field, to cling to his field. Verse 22, Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, Ruth, my daughter, it is good for you to work with his female servants so that nothing will happen to you in another field. Again, she's reiterating, you are safe in Boaz's field. He was correct to tell you to stay there. There is safety within the boundaries of his field. So Ruth stayed close to Boaz's female servants and gathered grain until the barley and the wheat harvests were finished, and she lived with her mother-in-law. Okay, I want to go into a few things here because that's the end of Ruth chapter 2. So I want to look back at Boaz's treatment of Ruth. We saw that he was kind to her. He was welcoming of her, a foreigner, a widow who worshiped pagan gods. He was concerned about her physical safety, in that he said, I have ordered all the young men to stay away from you, not to bother you. These young men will not come flirt with you, be handsy with you. You're not going to be sexually abused or assaulted in any way in my field. I have made sure of that. You are, I'm going to provide for your physical needs, and that I'm going to give you food, and I'm going to give you water. I'm going to provide for your spiritual needs, and that I'm going to pray for you. I'm going to pray for a blessing over you. I'm going to make sure that everybody within earshot knows what I think of you and how welcome you are on my field. I am going to take care of you emotionally. I'm going to leave all of these handfuls of grain on purpose for you, but I'm not going to have anybody let you know that. I don't want you to be embarrassed. I don't want you to be humiliated. I care about you emotionally, physically, spiritually, sexually, all of the above. Boaz showed the care for the full person that was Naomi. And Ruth, thank you. Why? Why do I keep doing that? Ruth.
Ruth.
So Boaz cared for Ruth's entire whole person. And so when I was studying this lesson, to give this lesson a few months ago, I knew why Boaz was so kind to Ruth and why he took such great care of her. I knew. But I am scouring every commentary I can find, just waiting for one man to point this out. And none of them did. I mean, not one man, not one male commentary pointed this blazingly obvious point out. Why was Boaz so careful with Ruth? Who was Boaz's mother?
Rahab.
Rahab the prostitute.
The foreigner.
The pagan. The non-Jew.
Mm-hmm.
The one who had been used and abused sexually. The one who knew what it meant to marry into a new faith, to move to a new land, to be a foreigner, to be an outsider, to have a past. Rahab was Boaz's mother, and that woman raised her son right.
Yeah.
Because when he saw Ruth, a foreigner, a widow, someone with a past, someone who did not belong to the Jews, someone who did not belong in Israel, someone who is considered an outcast, someone who should not have been welcome. When he saw Ruth, not only did he welcome her, but he knew exactly how to care for her because he knew exactly how his mother was cared for. And she instilled that in him. We've got to care for the physical needs. We've got to care for the emotional needs. We've got to care for the spiritual needs. We've got to care for the sexual needs. We've got to care for all of it because Rahab had been through it. And she raised her boy right. That is how Boaz knew how to treat this woman. He was raised by Rahab the prostitute. And how the male commentators missed out on that, I don't know. Because it's in the Bible. It's in the genealogy of Jesus. Boaz.
In Matthew 1.
Yeah. Boaz, came from Rahab the prostitute. It's in there. How is that not part of their commentaries? That Boaz knew how to treat a woman because of who his mother was. And so, ladies, let's just let this be an admonition to all of us with sons and with daughters. We're modeling for them what it is to treat people from the outside. We're modeling for them what it is to care for the foreigner, the widow, the sexually abused, the hurting. We are modeling that for them.
Yeah.
And let me tell you what, that is caught, not taught.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
That is caught, not taught. And I'm telling you here and now, Boaz caught how to treat a woman from his mother. So he says to Ruth, Ruth, here are the boundaries of my field. You don't know them, but my servants do. So stay close to my servants. There is favor in the field. There is favor in the field. But what comes along with the favor in the field? Work. You're not in the field to lay out and get a tan. That's what I want to do by the pool, but it's raining today, not going to happen. You're in the field to work. Ruth showed up in that field to work, and she found favor there. This is, again, God's sovereignty, but man's responsibility. The same thing with Rahab. The same thing with Naomi and Ruth getting up and leaving Moab and going into Bethlehem. You have to put feet to your faith. When you enter into the field, there is favor there, but there's work there. There is favor found through your work.
Reminds me of Rebecca with the camels.
Yes. She was watering the camels every day in the dark without any applause. So that when the time came for her to pull up 33 gallons or 300 gallons, whatever it was, of water for those camels, she had the muscle to do it.
She was ready.
There was favor in that field because she had been working in that field. We must pray like it depends on God, but we have to work like it depends on us. Pray and work. Faith and works. That's how it is. So there is favor in the field, and you will be working in that field, and you will find favor there as you work. But this is what's so important. There is favor in the right field.
Yeah.
There is favor in the field to which you have been appointed. There's lots of fields out there. Ruth could have gone to lots of fields to glean. But Boaz said, you stay here with my servants inside these boundaries, and there is where you will find favor. Don't go out here. I can't protect you in that field over there. I don't have jurisdiction in that field over there. I can't guarantee that you won't be hurt over there. But in this field, within these boundaries, within these borders, there is a grace for you, there's a strength for you, there's a protection for you. I can guarantee that there will be favor for you in the right field. And we were talking about this at Bible study on Tuesday night with the girls, because I had just said something, I guess very offhanded, but it really kind of connected with our friend Sean. I had said, we were on staff at a church, and we were very comfortable there for many years, but then it felt like the grace lifted, and we needed to get out. And she was like, you just said the grace lifted from a place. And I said, yes, the grace lifted for us from that place, and we needed to leave. And I said, because there was grace for us in another field. So that field that we were in, that we were working in with those boundaries where there was safety and protection and provision for so long, all of a sudden, those boundaries lifted, that grace lifted, that safety, that protection, that provision lifted from that field, and God was directing us to another field. And that happens. We don't stay in the same field our whole life. We will move from field to field, but we have to stay in the field that has been appointed to us, whether it's your job, whether it's a city that you live in, a relationship, whatever it is, you stay within the boundaries of that appointed field. If God says, hey, I've got grace for you as a second grade teacher, then you are a second grade teacher this year. Don't go try to teach ninth grade this year. God gave you grace for the second grade, okay? That's your field. If God gave you the grace and the provision to work at a certain job, or to serve at a certain ministry, or whatever it is, God gave us the grace and the provision to adopt 2 children from Uganda. That was our field. He didn't say go adopt 3 children from Kenya. I wouldn't have had grace for that. I wouldn't have had
the favor there.
The favor in that field like I had in Uganda, because that was the field he gave me, and the specific 2 children that he gave me. That was my field. That's where I had favor, in that field, because those were the boundaries there. So there is favor in the field. You're going to work in the field, but it has to be the right field. It has to be your appointed field. Mm-hmm. You try to go into somebody else's field. Oh, well, look. She's got a bigger harvest over in that field.
Looks greener over there.
That grass is greener. That barley looks better. I think I want to go over to that field for a little while. No, don't do it. You don't have favor in that field. She does. You have favor in your field. You have protection in your field. So Ruth's favor rested only within the confines of Boaz's field. She did not become captivated by another field. She didn't look over there and say, oh, that field's beautiful. There's a river going through that field. How lovely. Let me go over there and check that out. No, she stayed in the field that was appointed to her. She did not get greedy. When we stay within the field that God has given to us, when we are obedient to work the field that God has instructed us, here's what we find. We find permission in that field. We have permission to glean. We have permission to work. We have permission to collect. We have permission to do what we need to do for our families. There's permission in that field. There's protection in that field. Haven't I told all the other men around here not to lay a hand on you, Ruth? No one's coming for you here. There's protection here. You won't be sexually assaulted here. You're not going to be beat up here. You're going to be safe in this field. So there's permission to work. There's protection from harm. There is provision. There's handfuls of grain on purpose. There's handfuls of blessing on purpose. There is provision for you in your appointed field. There is purpose for you in your appointed field. I mean, you think how the work was hard for Ruth, yes, gleaning from morning till night, but think about the dignity that gave her to go and to be able to work and provide for her mother-in-law in a way that didn't cause her to commit a crime or, go against any morality code that she had. She was doing honest, good work in the field. And that gave her a purpose. It gave her a purpose to work. And then she had priority in that field. We have heavenly kingdom priority when we work within our appointed field. Now, I'm not saying this might not seem like an earthly priority, but I'm saying there's a kingdom priority. It may be earthly priority that you have in your field when you're working your appointed field, but there is a kingdom priority in that field. What do I mean? When you are staying within the boundaries of your field and your appointed field and you're working as unto the Lord, there is priority for you to ask for things, for you to call things from heaven. You have priority in the spiritual realm. You have priority against principalities, against demons, against the enemy. You have a priority there in the kingdom. And so you can call things out in the spirit and in the kingdom when you are working diligently as unto the Lord in your appointed field. There is a priority for you there. Just like we saw Boaz tell his servants, Ruth is here, keep an eye on her, make sure she stays close to the servants, give her extra handfuls on purpose. I want to make sure that she is well taken care of. She is my priority. We are God's priority. You are his priority. I am his priority. When we work within the boundaries of the field that he has given us, there is favor in the field, but there's favor in the right field.
Yeah,
there's
key.
Favor in the appointed field. When we work our appointed field, we have permission, protection, provision, purpose, and priority. And all of these belong to us, just like they did Ruth. And why was Boaz so awesome? Because who was his mama?
Rahab.
And don't forget it. Because good luck finding that in a commentary. Man, that was my soapbox for this week. I'm like, how is that? It's obvious. How do you disregard such an important piece of information?
And you don't
in your commentary.
And you don't gotta have be able to speak Hebrew or any of that to know.
No, you don't have to have your PhD in divinity.
Yeah.
You don't have to have your Master's of Divinity to know that Rahab was Boaz's mother. Can we talk about that for a minute?
Yeah.
But for some reason, all these guys with their PhDs couldn't figure it out. It takes some, you know what, ladies? Sometimes it takes a mom and a woman looking at scripture and coming at it from that perspective, which is, just as another small little soapbox here, which is why it's to the detriment of the church that we don't have more women teaching and preaching and in the rooms where decisions are made for churches, because we have a perspective. We have a very important perspective and view on things biblically, but we have insight into things that men don't see always, and vice versa. They have insight into things that we don't see. But if you hear nothing else today, hear that Boaz was a man of excellent character who was a prototype of Jesus. He was a picture of Jesus to come, and how he cared for the widow, the alien, the needy, and how he cared about every part of her life. And it was because he had a mother who had been through it.
And modeled
this for him.
Yes.
And he caught it. And that's our admonition today. Also, stay in your appointed field because there's favor there. But
okay,
that's the lesson, ladies. We love you guys so much. Join us on Thursday. Janie's going to continue taking us through Psalm 23. We can't wait to see you again on Thursday. We love you, sisters. Sisters with Swords is produced and edited by Holly Knight. Original music by the Minister of Funk and Husband of the Year, Bradley Knight. Artwork by Holly Knight. And dinner tonight will also be provided by Holly Knight. Please subscribe and share this podcast with your friends, and don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Sisters with Swords. We're cheering you on, sister. Go wield your sword.